Hey, everybody. Welcome to VaynerX Presents, Marketing for the Now. Gary, how are you doing?
I'm quite well. Andrea, how are you?
I am good. I'm always excited for these episodes, but I think this one is going to be a particularly juicy one. Last but not least, we welcome Carla Hassan, Chief Marketing Officer of Citi. Carla oversees Citi's branding and sponsorships, global consumer banking marketing, and its institutional client groups marketing and sponsorships. Previously, Carla held C-suite roles at Toys R Us, PepsiCo, the Kellogg Company, and more. Carla serves on the advisory board of the ANA's #SeeHer initiative and was named an Ad Age Woman to Watch. Welcome, Carla.
Hi, it's so nice to be here. Man, to hearing that about me, I think that just means I'm old more than anything else. All those things.
Carla, we're such friends that I get to hang out with you with different lighting, and like you really brought it today.
Listen, come on, I'm live with you. I gotta bring it. Are you kidding me? You've seen me at my worst, Gary.
Which is my favorite because maybe first of all, I love all the natural stuff, and second of all, I think you're the best. And I love you and your husband, your daughter. Big fan of you, the human, first, second, third, fourth, but then number 5, the marketer. And so let's focus on the marketer side.
Let's do it.
What are you trying to innovate?
Oh, Gary, I've been thinking about this word. It is so big. It's so big. There's so many ways into this conversation. I want to go to 2 places.
Please.
The first is digital innovation. I can't have the role that I am at the firm that I work at and not talk about digital innovation. And it's really interesting. Small story. When COVID first hit, we had so many consumers that have never actually deposited a check on their phone.
Right.
And, now they're afraid, right? Now they're afraid and they're like, I can't go into a bank, or the bank is closed. I can't do it. And so they have no choice. They've got to do it. Once they figured out that they could do that, and it was a seamless transaction, and that they trusted that their money actually was in their account, there's just no going back. Right? There's no going back. And so the pace at which—
Once you see it, you can't unsee it.
You can't unsee it. And actually, once you do it, you can't undo it, right? Like literally once you experience that and you're like, wait a minute, the money's there, just like they said it was going to be. Why would I actually ever go back into a retail location? Like literally, why would I ever walk there, particularly now? And that, I think that little story is just a microcosm of everything we're seeing, right? And so from our perspective, it is so important to not just kind of say, oh yeah, digital innovation is important for us, but to actually live it. And so what it's doing is it's actually creating these really unlikely partnerships. So Google, historically we might have seen as a competitor, right? Like tech is a competitor, particularly when you're, a financial services organization. But we recently announced a partnership with them because we felt like we just had to lean in. And so from an innovation perspective, particularly on the digital side, what it's doing is it's bringing their best-in-class user experience, if you will, and their technology, and our best-in-class know-how on banking. It's bringing them together, and now we're able to access an entire group of people that we never, ever, ever would have been able to access if it was Citi going out to them and saying, hey, open a bank account, right? Like, or open a savings account, it really puts the power of the two together. So for me, digital innovation has been really leaning into the most unlikely of people, and then also of partners, and then also thinking about like, what are the major behaviors that are changing and never going back, and how can we get at that as fast as possible? So I would say that that's the first part. And the second is innovation and thinking. I think, I've heard, Greg, a fellow Lebanese, you talked about his hair. You didn't talk about mine, Gary, but it's all good. It's all good.
I gave you such compliments up front. Come on. What do you want more?
I'm totally kidding. But it's not just about the technical know-how. I think when we think about innovation, we have got to start thinking about how do we think about innovative thinking? How do we think about flexibility and agility and taking chances, for crying out loud? And by the way, in my world, hard to do, right? Because we are in a regulated environment.
And do you think, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
Do you believe that the blockchain DeFi thing is going to force, that's going to be such a big combo that, do you think that in a weird, that's for another day.
Right.
Do you believe that because that's going to be in the air, that it might give you as a marketer more room? Because now all of a sudden what they might have seen as crazy, well, that's minor compared to what's going on over here. Do you feel like, yeah, I kind of see it.
We're already seeing it. We're already seeing it, Gary. And it's not even just from, again, like innovation, like what you're talking about in whether it's platforms or systems or even the way that money's moved around, whatever, but it's also in what we're seeing in communities. It's all of it. And so how do we really take some chances, get a little braver in the way that we're thinking, experiment a little bit more, which again is hard. It's hard.
Paint a picture for everybody. What would be considered something experimental from your point of view in your seat?
Okay, let me give you an example. I'll give you an example of something that we just lived actually with racial equity. We had developed something that, from a campaign perspective, or even like how we're talking about it, would just be, I would say, for some people, controversial, right? So we took a stand on something, we created some work, and it wasn't without its controversy internally, not because we didn't have the same values that we were talking about, but because people were like, well, using this kind of language or making these kind of stands, like, we've got constituents from both sides. Right? You got to be careful. And so I thought, okay, but we got to push this because it's the right thing to do. And so we experimented in a controlled environment. We're able to see, like, if we put this message out, what are people going to say? And so we did that. We put it out and we got great feedback. We got some naysayers, there's no doubt about it, but we got really good feedback. And then we're comfortable enough to say, all right, now how do we take it and really explode it on a broader level? I think things like that, and I've heard a couple of folks already talk about it, this notion of like, you've got to just try to do things incrementally. Don't try to boil the ocean, because you've got a whole bunch of naysayers around you that you're not going to be able to convince if you try to convince them with the really big thing. So go, do. Is
that something that everybody who's listening now, even if they have, even if they're not the boss of the boss of the boss, do you think that general thesis of like that incremental, even like as a conversation, like I actually have a very important question I think can help a lot of people, which is what I'm focused on right now when I do these kind of things. Do you believe that you are in this spot in your career because you were willing to politely or politically correctly communicate when you didn't agree with what the senior things were going on? I'm actually I think people need
100%, Gary, 100%. And I do think no matter who you are, no matter what level you are in an organization, this is actually interesting, right, to correlate with innovation, because we all talk about innovation as like the product or the platform or whatever. We miss the innovation in thinking. We miss the innovation in how you talk to somebody. There is a game in that, like there is a hustle in that, right? How do you talk to people differently? How do you get your point across? How do you put yourself in somebody else's shoes to know that they're looking at a very different KPI than you are? So how do you, in your head, on the spot, think about how to talk to them differently? And so I think, by the way, that my team uses it on me all the time, right?
You can see it.
They use it on me all the time. I can see it coming, and I actually love it. I love it.
By the way, same as me. I always look this way, and I'm like, I know what you're doing, and I love that you're doing that, so I'm going to reward that. Oh, I know what you're doing. I don't like that. I'm not going to reward.
That's right. That's right. That's exactly right. And it's interesting to your point about like, I'm in a certain position in my career where
real quick on that. I apologize, Carla, because I just try to think of all 2 hours, what value we can bring for everybody who's been here the whole time. Do you then say what we just said here, that maybe innovation of taking people realizing that EQ, not IQ, like, do you feel like the innovation of the conversation around emotional intelligence as leaders needs to be a conversation, period, to even begin to do the tangible part?
100%. And you know what, we talk about it today as empathy, right? Like you talk about it a lot too. We all talk about it as empathy. And it's such it used to be an under leveraged word and underappreciated word. And now everyone's trying to figure out what the hell it means, right? But the reality is, it's in its simplest form is put yourself in someone else's shoes, know where they're coming from. And then you can solve problems for them and with them, in some cases without even letting them know that it was your idea. That, to me, to your point, the EQ of that and the innovation of like the thinking is equally as important as, yes, there's all kinds of stuff happening from a product standpoint that we've got to stay in touch with, that we've got to stay on top of, that's making us braver, that's making us more courageous and more innovative faster. But that part of it, the EQ part of it, is so underrated. it, and people don't think about it enough. And I think using that more and more, that muscle more and more, helps you get to the product part, helps you get to the ultimate goal that you talked about.
I love you. I know it goes so fast.
Thank you. I know. Thank you.
Andrea, take us home.
All right. Thanks, Gary. And thanks everybody for joining us.